The Biden administration says it will begin construction of one new section of border wall.
I think what it's telling you is that their strategy is not working, hasn't been working now for 2.5 years.
The Border Patrol reports that there were almost 45,000 encounters with Chinese nationals trying to enter the U.S. in the last 12 months.
On the first day of war in Asia, or even before that, we are going to be fighting on our own soil.
And an extraordinary about-face by President Biden, who is now going to continue building the Trump wall that he swore he would never do.
No, there will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration.
Then he was struck with this reality. Migrants pouring into the U.S., even last night, by the thousands. More than 260,000 illegal southern border crossings in September alone. And citizens in cities like Chicago who see the benefits they used to get now going to non-citizens who've just arrived.
If you had your right mind and see a crowd like this, you would say to yourself, they don't want it. And we're not anti-migrants.
So now, with governors and mayors from both parties sending distress signals about migrants overwhelming shelters and draining their budgets, the Biden administration says it will begin construction of one new section of border wall. The former acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf is an expert on this. He's currently the executive director of the America First Policy Institute. Secretary Wolf, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, happy to. Thanks for inviting me to be on.
So as we just said, the governors and mayors are in distress. So the Biden administration is now going to construct and build more of the wall that you were involved in helping build with the Trump administration. Our first question is this an area where we're seeing the largest group of migrants flooding in, or is it convenient because the materials are already there, or both?
Well, it's probably a little bit of both. But again, the administration, what they've spent the last 2 years doing is playing politics with the border. They've canceled a number of policies and programs that were very effective, and they basically opened that border wide open. They've spent the last 2.5 years gaslighting the American people, trying to convince them that there's no crisis occurring. But yet now, after saying they will never build 1 mile or 1 inch of the border wall system, they have now put out a notice that they, in fact, plan to build over 20 miles of it. Talking about an immediate need and talking about the illegal apprehensions in the Rio Grande Valley, the RGV there in South Texas, and pointing to those apprehensions as the specific reason on why they need to build that border wall system. So I think what it's telling you is that their strategy is not working, hasn't been working now for 2.5 years, and now they're trying to throw everything at it to try to address the historic number of people coming across that border. It's a little too late for this action. They should have done this in 21, a couple of years ago, and maybe it would have had an effect then.
You just said they're playing politics the last 2 years. So let me ask you this. A lot of people are wondering, is this a political move to showcase their efforts in the presidential race in 2024?
Well, I think it is. I think in part of it is. If you listen to this administration right now, you have President Biden saying, well, our hands are tied. This was appropriated money by Congress, and Congress told us to build the wall. But yet, if you really don't believe in the wall, which they don't, and you're saying, well, we only had to do it because of Congress, then you would have slow rolled this for the next 3 years, right? You would not have signed waivers waiving 26 environmental laws because of, quote, an immediate need, which is what they've done. So you've got the president saying one thing, you have the secretary of DHS saying the other. They're at odds with one another. It's like they don't talk. But I do think your point is a good one, which is I also think they want to show the American people that they're trying to do something. They're trying to do something about the border situation. If you look at all the polling, I think it's only 23% of Americans believe that the president's on the right track on trying to secure that border. Now, he'll always have 20 to 25% that will follow him wherever. But the fact that over 70% of Americans don't believe we're on the right track on the southern border tells you that their strategy is broken, and I think they're grasping at straws.
Secretary, what kind of pressure do you believe the Biden administration is facing from the environmental left and the left-wing pro-illegal immigration lobby that led him to delay effective border policies, as you just mentioned?
Well, I think they're probably upset. They're probably upset with him now because they don't like any type of border wall system being constructed. They certainly don't like their environmental laws being waived. Now, look, I'm very familiar with those. I waived them time and again to build effective walls. They've done that. So we'll see. Look, they sued us left and right for all 4 years of the Trump administration as we decided to build that wall. Let's see if they file those same lawsuits now against DHS and the Biden administration because of the 20 or so miles that they're building under this waiver authority. We'll see if that happens. And if it doesn't, I think that tells you everything you know, that the politics is really at play here.
Secretary Wolf, once again, thank you for joining us here on Centerpoint.
Thank you.
In the meantime, there's a growing national security concern on our border. An alarming number of illegal migrants from China streaming in to the U.S. The Border Patrol reports that there were almost 45,000 encounters with Chinese nationals trying to enter the U.S. in the last 12 months. Many of these were military-age men, not desperate families. Here are the questions tonight. Are they the guys working with the drug cartels? Are they government spies trying to infiltrate this country? Or are they just looking for the freedom they don't have in China? Well, to get those answers, we're now joined by Gordon Chang, a distinguished senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute. Gordon, we appreciate you joining us this evening here on Centerpoint.
Well, thank you so much, Joe.
Gordon, my father had a saying. He would say, son, when you're about to do something wrong, I want you to say it out loud to yourself to see if it makes sense. So I'm going to say this out loud to you, Gordon. Thousands of younger Chinese men are entering the U.S. or trying to enter the U.S. illegally. Is there something wrong with that?
Well, there's certainly something that looks very, very wrong. We are seeing Chinese males in packs of 5 to 15 of military age, as you pointed out, unaccompanied by family groups who pretend not to speak English. And Border Patrol knows that some of them have links to the Chinese military. So we've got to be extremely disturbed by this, especially because, you know, we learned about that secret Chinese lab in Reedley, California in the spring, where they had at least 20 pathogens and almost 1,000 mice that have been genetically engineered to spread disease. So we got to worry that these individuals are going to link up with these Chinese labs and do all sorts of things in our country.
No doubt about that. It makes sense to follow this. A national security expert told Newsweek this week that she believes that some of these young men are involved in a Chinese spy operation. Do you think there's a serious national security risk following these people?
Well, yes, and certainly we know that Chinese doctrine is to hit the United States. They have what they call unrestricted warfare, which is to use all tactics, including terrorism, against the United States. And this fits within that doctrine. Now, China denies that it has an unrestricted warfare campaign, but we have seen evidence of this across the board over the course of decades. So, Joe, we have to be alert to this, especially because the Biden administration is not tracking these individuals as they stream into the United States.
Oh, yeah. We saw what they did with the balloon, the floating balloon, for several weeks. We know they're certainly not tracking these young men who have military background. So let me ask you this, Gordon, you had just mentioned this, that America could go to war with Asia on American soil. And one of the things they would do, that would be a risk of sabotaging our military bases, our power stations, and our reservoirs. What can be done right now to prevent this? If, like you said, the Biden administration, it seems like as if they don't care.
Yes, they don't seem to care, and they're not alive to the risk. So what we need to do is stop these males from coming into our country. We've got to track the ones who've already come here, which is going to be a very big job because, as you point out, there have been tens of thousands of Chinese who have entered our country. They've got to probably link up with known cells here, so maybe we can find them that way. But this is a problem because, as I've said before, we'll be on the first day of war in Asia, or even before that, we are going to be fighting on our own soil. And this is going to be something that's going to take most Americans by surprise. We are just not alive to this danger.
Scary times indeed. In 30 seconds or less, one last question, Gordon. China is a major source of fentanyl pouring in to the U.S. We've had congressmen and senators on Centerpoint discussing that ad nauseum. So let me ask you this. Do you think some of these Chinese migrants could be involved in the fentanyl trade, and how big of that do you believe it is?
They could be. I think it's really the Mexican cartels that are controlling this. But we know one thing, Joe, and that is Xi Jinping and the Communist Party are behind the fentanyl gangs. They support them with diplomats. They launder their proceeds. They know exactly what these fentanyl gangs are doing. So we need to go to the top of this criminal organization, which is the Communist Party and Xi Jinping.